Hello, full-bodied family. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of the Full-Bodied Crime Podcast. My name's Kayla, and I'm so glad to have you here. Although I'm not necessarily glad to be presenting this next case because it's truly horrific and extremely sad, and also very, very recent, which tends to pull at the heartstrings a little more. But regardless of that, thank you all so much for tuning in with us. And without further ado, let's get into the crime. Please don't forget that this podcast is not for children and listener discretion is advised. So, today we'll be discussing the murder of Melissa Hamilton. Now, like I said, this is an extremely recent murder, and some of the details are basically unfolding as I research this episode. But this murder was absolutely horrific, and it's one of those crimes that kind of once again brings to your attention that you have to be aware of your surroundings at all times. At home, at work, while you're driving. Just be alert and never be too trusting, especially if you're in an environment that you're comfortable in, because sometimes you tend to let your guard down and you never know what type of danger is simply lurking around the corner. One thing I have with me religiously is pepper spray, and I have one in my backpack, in my car, on my keychain, next to my bed. You guys seriously never be too sure. And one of my main things with this podcast is to try and prevent similar crimes from happening. So that's why I'm completely advocating for some sort of defense against these sick predators. So, Melissa Hamilton was a completely innocent victim, and since her murder is so fresh, I just want to extend my greatest condolences to her family and friends. I truly couldn't imagine or can't imagine what you're going through at this time, and this case was so hard to even do because it's just so tragic and heartbreaking, and Melissa was just completely innocent. That's it. She was so innocent, and this should have never ever happened. But as we know, crime is everywhere, and sometimes the most harmless, kind, and unsuspecting people are the ones who fall victim. So, Melissa Hamilton, also known as Missy, was an adorable 50-year-old woman who was a woman of God, had an extremely strong faith, and just by looking at her pictures, you can see her positive energy just radiating, and you can tell that she was just overall a happy and enthusiastic person, and just overall amazing. And for 25 years, she was married to a man named Jack, and they were seemingly a very in love, happy couple, and she was a mother to two sons, and as I look at some of the quotes from interviews with their sons, they clearly absolutely adored their mother. Now, Melissa did experience some hardships throughout life, and at one point she suffered from drug addiction, but she was able to recover from her hardships and later went on to actually become a substance abuse counselor herself. The Tennessean reports that the Christ-Life Community pastor Scott Hord said, quote, "She found hope and she took hope out into the world." Melissa actually spent some time incarcerated for her drug addiction, but then she basically had the choice between her family, herself, or the drugs, and she made her decision very, very clear. Melissa went on to do great things, and she ended up changing the lives of so many people that she encountered. So, after her incarceration, she ended up attending Argosy University in Nashville. I hope I'm not butchering that name, but at Argosy University, she ended up earning her bachelor's in psychology, with her specialty being in substance abuse, and then she further went on to get her MA in mental health counseling. Missy took her experience of past drug addictions and turned it into a complete positive, making it her life's mission to help other people break their addictive behaviors. I think it's so amazing what she did for people who sought counseling from her, because it's one thing to be a mental health care provider or an addiction counselor, but it's such a different perspective when the professional can say, like, hey, I've been there, I did this, and now we're going to get through this together step by step. Like I've said a million times, I want to go into psychiatry, but my means of helping people is going to have to be based on research and my natural compassion versus me being able to say that I've been there and can relate to what the person's going through, because I have no idea what they're going through. I don't even have the slightest idea. I've never been there. I've never been addicted to drugs or alcohol. And yes, I've been around people who do suffer, and I have a long line of alcohol and drug abuse and both sides of my family, really, but I can't say that I directly know what the addicted individual is facing. So, as I'm about to begin my medical journey into this mental health field, I really applaud the people like Missy who have different ways of connecting to their patients. And I just hope and pray that I can offer the same amount of comfort to future patients through my means of practicing medicine someday. But I really, really applaud people like Missy. So, Missy had been clean for 11 years at the time of her murder, and she worked as the assistant director at the Crossroads Counseling Center, where she had worked for 5 years before her murder. And this Crossroads was located on Gallatin Pike Street in Madison, Tennessee, which per Google Maps seems to be located like in the northeast area of Nashville. But the Crossroads Counseling Center is a facility that provides support and services for individuals who suffer from a variety of hardships, really ranging from domestic violence situations to drug and alcohol abuse. They even provide anger management classes, interventions for like batterers themselves, as well as DUI and alcohol and drug programs. So Missy was very devoted to her job, and it wasn't unusual for her to be at work late due to those classes being later in the evening. And she would then sometimes stay behind, and I'm sure finish up paperwork and such. I suspect that due to staying at work late, it wasn't abnormal for her husband to fall asleep before Missy got home, but obviously I'm not too sure. So, on the morning of Wednesday, December 4th, 2019, Jack Hamilton woke up at around 6 a.m. and discovered that his wife, Melissa, wasn't in bed next to him. Now, this was odd because she had worked late the night before, so she should have been home sleeping or getting ready for the next day's work. But around their house, Missy was nowhere to be found, so her husband immediately became concerned because I'm guessing this wasn't like Missy at all. She was a devoted wife, a devoted mother, and for her to be out without calling the family was seemingly not in her character at all. So, per FoxNews.com, after Missy didn't come home from work, her husband then made the call to police and reported her missing, and they were dispatched to the Crossroads Counseling Center where Missy had worked. So when police arrived to check on the Crossroads facility at around 6:30, the first indication that something wasn't right was that Missy's white Ford Focus was still parked outside of her work. I'm hoping officers were optimistic and were thinking maybe she fell asleep or maybe she was at her father's or a friend picked her up, but I'm sure it's hard for police to think the best because of the daily traumas they're exposed to. But regardless of anything they've seen, I'm sure that investigators were not ready to confront what was inside of the Madison Crossroads facility, and they could have never fathomed the horrific crime scene that they were about to walk in on. So on December 3rd, 2019, and you guys, that was a little over 2 months ago. So, I mean, this murder is extremely recent. But on this December 3rd day, something completely unexpected and absolutely shocking happened at the Crossroads Counseling Center. December 3rd, 2019 was like any other day for Missy Hamilton. Per WSMV.com, she had taken her father to the eye doctor that day, and she had recently began taking care of him because his wife had actually died the month prior. And I'm unsure if this wife that passed was Missy's mother or a stepmom. I couldn't figure it out, but regardless, she was caring for her widowed father, and that day specifically, she took him to the eye doctor, dropped him back off at home, and they exchanged their I love yous before heading back to work. Now, her dad did mention in this video that he was concerned over her workspace environment because just 2 weeks prior, there was an argument between two men at the Crossroads Center, and Missy basically inserted herself in the middle of them to prevent any further altercation from occurring. So, there are risks associated with the job, and sometimes the people you get involved with might be risky too, unfortunately, but on the 3rd, she was working a seemingly routine workday, and she had a late night group counseling session that ended around 7:30 p.m. that night. So, after everyone left, Missy was finishing up at the office, and once again, everything seemed completely normal. But in an instant, Missy's place of work went from a place of hope to a place of complete horror. So fast forwarding to the next day on December 4th, 2019. So Missy was at work on December 3rd. Her husband didn't see her. Now it's December 4th the next morning at around 6:30 in the morning. Police are now entering the Crossroads Counseling Center, and they discover the body of Melissa Hamilton. The scene was something out of a horror movie, with blood splatter on the walls, the victim in a pool of blood, found naked, and a scene that showed immediate signs of struggle and an immense amount of trauma to the body. A direct quote from Fox17.com states, quote, Metro Police Detective Christopher Coate revealed Hamilton was at the front desk area when the attack happened. Coate said that the blinds were open and the lights were on, meaning Hamilton was likely visible through the windows. What happened next is what police refer to as a brutal sexual assault and murder. Coate described a gruesome crime scene as blood splatter covered the walls. Hamilton's jeans were found around her ankles, her bra was cut off, and a trail of blood led from the room where she was killed to the back door where her murderer made their escape. End quote. This murder seriously makes me sick to my stomach. Like, this is just proof that danger is seriously everywhere. I was just in Nashville at the end of December, so maybe 2 weeks after this occurred, and the whole area, the whole state of Tennessee, really, it just makes you naturally feel safe. But a news report I found on WKRN.com did state that this particular area of Madison was known to somewhat be a recovery town where I'm guessing half the people are maybe still experimenting with drugs, half are trying to recover. And it's also a large homeless population base. So there were people that said that they didn't feel safe always at night and that they appreciated that some areas did provide security. I mean, regardless, there's no way Missy could have realized what was about to occur nor prepared for it. Her group class it just ended at the moment that this predator saw her alone. The moment he spotted her through the blinds, he attacked. So, luckily, security footage was able to aid investigators in walking them through the steps of exactly what had happened to Missy. Now, I haven't personally seen the video, I don't believe it's released, but what I can make of it from the information provided from the Tennessean, footage obtained from the nearby Madison Library showed that Missy was sitting at her desk with the lights on and she was visible through the blinds at around the time of 7:30 p.m., right when her class left. Now, at this time, the camera is also watching a man that is wearing a hard hat inside of the library and he's checking out a book on carpentry. So you have Missy in the background and this man checking out a book. So this man exits the library and everything is still seemingly normal. But investigators then see the beginning stages of the murder of Missy Hamilton. The man who had checked out the book gets onto his bike, rides it across the way to the Crossroads Counseling Facility, stops, and walks into the building at 7:38 p.m. The surveillance tape then shows two figures in the Crossroads Counseling Center, and moments later the lights shut off. A direct quote from Adam Tamburin's article in the Tennessean states that the suspect then, quote, walked out the back door about 15 minutes later, leaving behind a bloody crime scene that was particularly brutal, end quote. The lifeless body was left overnight and found the next morning in what can only be described as that horrific movie scene. Another direct quote from the Tennessean article states, quote, blood was splattered on the walls of the counseling center. Chairs that had been arranged for a group session were overturned around her body. A trail of blood led to the back door and a knife was found on the ground. The day after the murder on December 4th, 2019, police either had no leads or they weren't reporting their leads to the media, which is completely understandable. And honestly, my guess is that possibly earlier in the day they didn't have leads, but after they were able to obtain the surveillance footage, I feel like their lead was right there in front of them on the camera, plain as day. So, obviously, the knife found behind a refrigerator in the building was suspected to be the murder weapon, but the testing is still being performed and all evidence involved with this case is still in the lab. But the evidence that has been obtained, even without the lab's verification, all leads to one man, a man named Brian Conley. Brian Conley was a 31-year-old man who seemingly had no relation to Missy at all. He didn't attend any of the group meetings. He never sought addiction or domestic abuse counseling. He was in a different age group than Missy. He was almost 20 years younger than her. I mean, seemingly the two had no knowledge that either existed until the very moment that they met. Now, how detectives stumbled upon Conley and pinned him as the main suspect was that he had been the man in the hard hat who checked out the carpentry book just moments before the murder of Melissa Hamilton. Conley was the one seen entering the building, popping into frame showing someone talking to Melissa seconds before the lights went off. And then he was the one seen exiting the building approximately 15 minutes after he entered. Melissa would never exit the building and make it out of the Crossroads building that night. On December 5th, 2019, 2 days after the murder, Connolly went to return the carpentry book he had rented from the Madison Library, and that is when investigators arrested him for the brutal murder of Melissa Hamilton. So, after warrants were obtained, the police then went to Conley's apartment where they just found more incriminating evidence, which included bloodstained jeans that are currently being tested for DNA linking him to the crime of Missy. Another piece of incriminating evidence is that Conley actually didn't show up to his construction job the day following the murder. So, per the Tennessean, a direct quote states, when a supervisor called to ask where he was, he said he had hurt his hand last night playing with a knife. The next day, Conley returned to work with his right pinky bandaged, and it was later discovered that this wound was consistent to the knife found at the crime scene and the knife presumed to have been used to end Missy's life. So, on another live news report from WSNV.com, the anchor states he got a quick statement from Missy's husband, who is completely and understandably too distraught and upset to get onto camera. But he told the anchor that Missy was a fighter, and that's exactly what she did. She fought, and Connolly obtaining the injury from the incident added more evidence to the case, and everything is just pointing back to Brian Conley. Now, this anchor also reports that Conley had previously been arrested for burglary in 2006, and he was supposed to serve a 15-year sentence. So it's unclear why he didn't serve this complete 15 years because, I mean, had he done his full time, he wouldn't have been in prison until 2021. So a more in-depth report from WREG.com discusses this prior arrest as, quote, according to the police report, Conley forced a clerk at the Mapco Express to get down on the ground. He then shot him 4 times in the head with a pellet gun. The pellets became lodged into the man's skull and had to be surgically removed, police said. He was sentenced to 15 years in the state penitentiary and released on July 10, 2019, according to state records. End quote. I'm sure the family and friends are so upset that he didn't serve his full sentence. I mean, had he served the full time, Missy could still possibly be here today because he would have still been in prison. But Brian Conley is currently arrested and being tried for the murder of Melissa Hamilton. And although official lab reports are still pending, all signs are leading to him as being the monster who took away someone's daughter, mother, wife, friend, and support system. This man is an absolute monster, and watching a video of him in court, he seriously seemed to be like doodling or writing something down, and I feel like he had this disgusting and gross grin on his face, like he didn't have a care in the world, and that's what my that's why, friends, like please, please, please just always have your guard up. There are just sick people in this world, and you never know when a crime, especially to this magnitude, is ever going to occur. So, I was really passionate about this episode, and I wanted to do this because I feel like Melissa's story needs to get out into the world beyond Nashville. Because even if this episode has an impact on one life, I feel like I owe that to Melissa. So, this is a story for current addicts, former addicts, just to know that you can turn your life around. You still have time to be in control. Melissa experienced time incarcerated and almost lost her family because of drugs. And instead of just accepting this as her fate, she grabbed the reins of her life and went out to get her master's, all while having 2 children and being married. Like, that's a lot of work. But you're not defined by your addiction, and Melissa was a great example of this. You're not defined by the demons that have seemed to take over your life. You are in there somewhere, the real you, and you can fight to be the best version of yourself and accomplish all of your hopes and dreams. My friend actually used to be a homeless alcoholic. I just had met her in my last class of the year, and she was amazing, but she just got accepted into a PhD program to get her doctorate. Like, it's just amazing. You can do it. If someone you know is suffering from addiction, if you're suffering from addiction, encourage them. I encourage you, and just let them know that it's never too late to make all of their dreams come true. Life is clearly too short, people. So, I also wanted to do this story to keep people aware to always hope for the best, but imagine the worst. I don't know if that's how the saying goes, but basically, always hope and pray that you'll be safe, but never assume that you're invincible and that something bad can't happen to you. Be prepared. Buy pepper spray. Seriously, biggest pepper spray advocate ever. Although one of my pepper sprays on my keychain is sparkly, and my best friend's daughter keeps wanting to like play with it, so I told her we can't touch it because it's Tapatio and like super hot because she knows what Tapatio is. And now she always wants me to put it on her food, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can't put the Tapatio on your food. She doesn't get it, but so don't lie to a 3-year-old. But get pepper spray, defend yourselves, find means of always preparing you for the worst situations. But I always hope for the best. But anyway, Melissa Hamilton's memory will forever live on with her friends and family. Watching the video of her father, I mean, I was devastated. He is clearly heartbroken, and her husband's just trying to keep his sons and himself to survive this awful time. There's a GoFundMe dedicated to a scholarship for Melissa's youngest son, so it's linked to one of the Tennessean sites, I believe. And if you go type it into Google, it does pop up. But speaking of the Tennessean and other news sites I cited throughout the article, they all did a really great job in reporting Melissa's case, and I appreciate those authors immensely for what they provided and for my information and research. But lastly, you guys can get all of the sources that they're linked to the website Full-Bodied Crime, and photos pertaining to this crime are on our Instagram FB_crime, our Twitter at Full-Bodied Crime, and our Facebook Full-Bodied Crime. Oh my gosh, it's like almost midnight in California. I'm clearly not able to talk. Also, if you want to listen on YouTube, all of our episodes are linked on there. And last but not least, please go review this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast and subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when there's a new episode out. I know this episode was shorter, but I'll have another episode out soon. I have a few hours left on this like month's Buzzsprout thing, so I need to use those up in the next 12 days. So be expecting numerous episodes soon, although they do take a lot of time to research, and which is kind of ironic because seriously, I mean, I just got done with college and I had to write a few research papers and I hated it, but I absolutely love doing this. So I guess it all happened for a reason. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Once again, my heart and prayers are with the loved ones of the Hamilton family. And all I can truly say to you guys is that I'm praying for you and praying for peace to all of you through this time. But in addition to the Hamilton family and friends, I hope